Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. The Arkansas coaching job. Okay. This is how fast the carousel is moving. Arkansas opened what? 2 weeks ago on Sunday. It feels like a lifetime and a half ago. Okay. Sam Pittman goes out after the fifth game going into the bye. I guess it was 3 weeks now because they lose to Notre Dame at home. They go into the bye. Sam Pittman is fired. Bobby Petrino is named the interim head coach. They played Tennessee this past weekend. I actually thought it went pretty successfully, but the search is on for the next Arkansas coach. Transparently, I think there's about 4 or 5 different stories that are worth discussing here, including James Franklin, including this, including that. So let's go ahead and dive in. Before we get to the first one, I think it's at least worth noting. I still think I never speak for any fan base. Every single Arkansas fan I know this, though. They want to win football games. And so there is a good portion of fans that want Bobby Petrino as the head coach. And I think there's plenty that don't. And whatever your opinion is on Bobby Petrino, I'm not here to tell you you're right or wrong. But what I am here to say is, I still think if we were putting odds on it, Bobby Petrino probably has to be considered the favorite because if he wins enough games, he will be the head coach. The Petrino era part 2 started last Saturday at Tennessee. Now you can look at it from a glasses half full, glasses half negative, glasses half empty perspective. The glasses half full, top 25 team on the road, team that is very much in the playoff mix. You played them right down to the wire. You outgained them in terms of total offense, and you had a chance to win in Knoxville, one of the toughest places in college football to play. That is the glasses half full. If you keep that momentum going, you're going to clip off some of these good teams down the stretch. Now, conversely, I think the negative is you didn't win a close game, just like you didn't beat Memphis this year, just like you didn't beat Ole Miss this year, just like you didn't win some close games in the Pittman era. Turnovers are still an issue. The defense maybe is improved, but not that much. And so I saw a little bit of both sides of things from the Arkansas side of things. I'm not here to tell you who's right, who's wrong, who's this, who's that. What I will say is a couple things. One, the offense is going to put you in position to win games. 2, some of the teams, some of the games on the schedule that looked so tough a couple months ago, they don't look as tough anymore. LSU is not good. I'm just here to tell you the defense is pretty good. The offense is an abomination, okay? You can go and win at LSU. I'm not saying you will, but I think you can. I think the jury is still out on Missouri. You get Auburn at home next week. We know about Auburn's struggles. So there are wins to be had. I'll say this, even A&M. You look at who A&M has beaten, everybody in the SEC is a bottom half of the SEC team, and they were all at home. Florida at home, Mississippi State at home, Auburn at home. They're going on the road in the SEC for the first time this game this week, and I know Arkansas fans know it's not at Jerry World. You could pick off Texas A&M. You pick off Texas A&M, you got to feel good about being able to win any game left on the schedule. And so if I was still handicapping it, I think Bobby Petrino has to be deemed the favorite because he has the job right now. And if he gets the wins needed to get if he gets the wins that he believes he's capable of getting, I think he gets the job. With that said, though, Bobby Petrino, we could talk about Bobby Petrino all day. There's some news, notes, and interesting developments over the last couple days. So let's go ahead and get into them. The first one, weird situation with Missouri offensive coordinator Kirby Moore. Okay, so Kirby Moore, offensive coordinator at Missouri, brother of Kellen Moore. That's an interesting fun fact. New Orleans Saints head coach. But there was a report like early to middle of last week that Kirby Moore interviewed for the Arkansas job. And I think kind of the belief was, hey, it's kind of a plus both ways. You kind of get in front of the administration in Arkansas. You get experience being interviewing. And so maybe, you don't get this job, but you get some reps interviewing. And maybe when the next job opens up, you feel more comfortable. Then for Arkansas, you get a candidate under your belt. You kind of get your pitch together, whatever. Well, I bring it up because the news of that hypothetical interview got back to Eli Drinkwitz. Now, Eli Drinkwitz at one of his press conferences this week kind of went on a rant about the state of the media, people putting stuff out there with no backing. And in the process, he basically said, yeah, that Kirby Moore thing did not happen. Producer Matt, you can play Eli Drinkowitz talking about he's mad at the media.
Weekly about blocking out distraction, both for you and your team, with coaching moves happening earlier and earlier. How do you compartmentalize like all the rumors and all the talk and the fact that your name will pop up various places?
Yeah, I kind of referenced it this. I got problems of my own, and I think the number one issue right now amongst college football is the noise that's associated with people's programs at all points of the season, whether good, bad, or indifferent. There's no such thing as journalistic integrity on social media. There's just wild, outlandish reporting. And anybody's name, I'll bet every sitting head coach has been listed as a candidate for some job so far. And as a team, as a coach, we got to ignore the noise and focus on the things that we can control, which is winning and losing football games. Last week it was really unfortunate that Kirby's name got associated to something that was a complete lie. He'd never interviewed, didn't talk to anybody at Arkansas. It's a bunch of bull crap put out there to try to create distractions in a narrative that then comes over after the fact, after the game. And it's really disappointing, all right, that this stuff happens. Because again, Twitter ain't real, and it's just a bunch of bull crap thrown on message boards. So how do I block it out? I ignore it. And I get mad about it when people ask me about it.
Twitter ain't real, and it's just a bunch of bull crap. By the way, I like how he's talking about how there's no journalistic integrity on Twitter. I feel partially responsible for that with my Billy Napier tweet from the other day. Anyway, neither here nor there. So I'll be really quickly on Kirby Moore. I mean, if he says it didn't happen, whatever. I think it's actually kind of a weird thing for a coach to say and a coach to do, to say that his assistant didn't interview, right? Because isn't part of being a head coach helping elevate your assistants? Don't all of your assistants, for the most part, all want to be head coaches in the future? And so if that's the case, even if it's not true, is it the worst thing that it got out that one of your assistants interviewed for an SEC head coaching job? Isn't that a good thing? Isn't it a good thing for Kirby Moore? Isn't it a good thing for his opportunities in the future? Because, yeah, maybe Arkansas isn't a legitimate landing spot for him, but the counter to that would be this. What if Jon Sumrall gets hired somewhere and Tulane opens? Kirby Moore could be a candidate there. What if Alex Golesh takes a job? What if Alex Golesh takes the Arkansas job? Kirby Moore could be a candidate there. And so I thought it was actually kind of weird, and I thought it was a little bit bad for his own assistant. Like, I think you should be putting it out there that he's interviewing. I think it's a good thing for him, but I guess we can go ahead and cross Kirby Moore's name off that list. I don't think he was a realistic candidate anyway, but apparently he's just not even a candidate at all, and Eli Drinkowitz wants you to know it. One guy who is a candidate, maybe he shouldn't be anymore, is Dan Mullen. So we've talked a lot about Dan Mullen. I think the day the job opened up, I probably didn't talk about him enough. But I think as the job evolved, you kind of understand like why he would be a realistic candidate. He is a guy who had a ton of success in the SEC, especially at a job that is considered kind of a bottom half of the SEC job at Mississippi State. Won a ton of games there at one point, had him ranked number one in the country, really did a lot of good things there. And I think when the Arkansas job first opened up, he was kind of a guy that kind of felt like a natural fit if you miss on whatever you deem to be the really big swings. If that's John Gruden, if that's whoever, Dan Mullen is a guy, has won in the SEC, has had success in the SEC, and is also worth noting, like having success at UNLV. UNLV 6-0 this weekend, going into a rematch they're 6-0 going into the weekend. They have a rematch against Boise State, who they played in the Mountain West Conference Championship game a year ago. So he's 6-0. He had success in the SEC. By the way, his time at Florida, certainly with a little revisionist history, feels like it maybe wasn't as bad as we thought at the time. Well, Dan Mullen was asked about the Arkansas job. Well, he wasn't really asked about the Arkansas job. He was asked about his name being linked to jobs. By the way, a couple things. One, if you're an Arkansas fan, and you're on social media, Eli Drinkowitz says don't go on Twitter, but I say if you're an Arkansas fan, follow Torres on the Hogs for all your late-breaking Arkansas news, okay? With that said, Dan Mullen has not only been linked to the Arkansas job, He has also been linked now to the Penn State job. He's from Pennsylvania. I think that's a bridge maybe too far. But Dan Mullen asked about other coaching jobs at a press conference earlier this week, gave some very strong statements about his candidacy for other jobs.
Out his office yet, your name had come up as a possible replacement for Yahoo Sports.
Yeah.
How are you going to keep from this becoming
I'll be here.
distraction?
I'll make it.
As
You
more coaches,
want me to do that? I'm going to be the head coach of UNLV next year. I'll be here. I'm not going anywhere.
have you said that to Eric Clark and your players yet?
I said to the players, I told them that. I said, good or bad, right? It's a transfer portal world. I said, don't get all excited. Think I might go somewhere that you think is like a better place. I'm going to be here. You guys are stuck with me.
Dan Mullen, I will be the UNLV head coach next year. First of all, let me give Dan Mullen a little bit of credit here because, we talked about Matt Rule with Penn State on the Tuesday show. Matt Rule goes to the podium, is asked about Penn State, and he gives this, positive but sort of non-committal answer about Penn State, basically saying, I love, listen, I have a great relationship with the AD, and, I met my wife at Penn State, but I also love Nebraska. And I did say, if you're a Nebraska fan that believes that Matt Rule is the guy that is taking you to the top of college football, it wasn't really the definitive answer you were looking for. Now, it wasn't negative, and I still think, you listen to Dylan Raiola. Dylan Raiola is adamant, Matt Rule's not going anywhere. But I just bring it up because, it wasn't really the answer that you were looking for if you were a Nebraska fan hoping to keep Matt Rule. And so I bring it up because I give Dan Mullen credit. Maybe he's lying through his teeth. I kind of sort of believe him, though, and I give him credit for saying, look, I am going to be here. And the reference that he made is players are probably coming to him like, Coach, if you go to Penn State, if you go to Arkansas, if you go to the SEC, could I come with you? Is there a spot for old Torres or old, whoever? And it's funny, I know I've referenced this guy a lot, but to use a basketball crossover, I think there's some parallels here to Will Wade. I know I've mentioned Will Wade a lot, but I remember him talking about this last year when he was a candidate for other jobs, as players basically being like, when I recruited them, some of the reason they came to play for me was because they believed that I would be going up to the high major level again soon and that they could potentially come with them. Conversely, I think Will Wade also is a fair parallel to Dan Mullen for this reason. Dan Mullen just got to UNLV. And listen, I don't know Dan Mullen. I don't know what his intentions are. I don't know how long he wants to stay at UNLV for. My guess is at some point he would like to get back to a major conference. But what I'll also say is that it does feel to me like he just got there, and it seems like he's happy there. How could you not be happy? He's 6-0. That guy has been in the SEC. He knows about the SEC meat grinder. He knows about the media coverage. Listen, I'm in Vegas all the time. I'll be there in a couple weeks for the college basketball tip-off games, Florida, Arizona, BYU, Villanova. It's a big market, but it's not an insane market. They have an NHL team. They have the Raiders. UNLV, they want to be good, but there aren't 100 media members. His kids, and I think he's got kids still in high school, middle school, whatever. They can go to school, and nobody's harassing them if UNLV loses a game. And so I'm not saying he's going to be there forever, but I still think he's enjoying the honeymoon phase of being the UNLV head coach, especially because they're 6-0. And to go to the Will Wade parallel from a minute ago, you look at Will Wade, when he got to McNeese, he kind of publicly said, he said on this podcast right here, listen, when I got here, I committed to be here for a minimum of 2 years. They gave me a chance when nobody else would. They gave me an opportunity when everybody else did not believe that I was good enough to do the job. And so he went to McNeese. They won 30 whatever games. I think 30 games his first year. He comes back for a second year. Now he's at NC State. And I do wonder if it's the same with Dan Mullen. I mean, his family's been living wherever. They just probably got to Vegas in, June or July of last year, probably just moved into a house June or July of last year. And I think he's still enjoying that honeymoon phase. Now, you go 10-2, you lose some games, crowd gets weird. I don't know. The other thing too, UNLV for its level is a good job. Now, it's weird with the Mountain West stuff. Remember, a lot of those Mountain West schools are leaving for the new Pac-12, San Diego State, Boise, whatever. But that is a well-funded school, all things considered. They play in an NFL stadium. I think you can win there. Recruits want to play there. I just don't think it's the worst place to play. Now, if you want to get back to the SEC, I think Arkansas is a great job, but I kind of sort of believe him when he says he's not interested. Really quick, a couple other things. Jon Sumrall is a name that has certainly popped up. He is the Tulane head coach. Tulane sitting at 5-1. They won that game on Friday night that, half of these SEC fan bases were watching. I think Kentucky fans were watching. I think Auburn fans were watching. I think Arkansas fans were watching. But I saw an interesting story from Best of Arkansas. And I know the guys who run that. I did not reach out to them about this, but this caught my attention about Jon Sumrall. We don't have audio, but it's obviously an article. We have video. This is via thebestofarkansas.com. Matt, you could pop up those boards there. This was really interesting to me. According to a source, a board of trustee member met with Clint Dowdell, the agent of Tulane coach Jon Sumrall, last week. The 43-year-old is viewed as a rising star in the coaching ranks, inheriting a Troy program that had 3 straight losing seasons. Sumrall turned the Trojans, this is Troy, into a top 25 team in year 1 and won 23 games in 2 separate seasons. Over the course of 2 seasons, that helped him land his current job with Green Wave. Even though Fritz, who expressed interest in the job, I guess this is a reference to Willie Fritz, the former Tulane head coach, even though Fritz expressed job in the Arkansas opening in 2019 and is now at Houston, he had already built Tulane into a mid-major power. Sumrall has maintained the school status as a top group of 5 program. And then finally they wrap. It's easy to see why the Razorbacks are interested in him. However, that's also why almost every Power 4 school with an opening will be interested in Sumrall. Because of that, our source said Dowdell, who also represents the likes of Oregon's Dan Lanning and Notre Dame's Marcus Freeman, indicated Sumrall will be patient and see which other SEC schools open this cycle. That could spell bad news for Arkansas, who almost certainly won't be the only vacant head coaching job in the SEC this offseason. So, inside Best of Arkansas puts out that article. And I will just tell you my inclination on Jon Sumrall is that I think there's probably a lot of truth there. Is that I do think, listen, like every young coach, I think at some point he wants to get to the SEC. Lane Kiffin said earlier this week he believes that he's running an SEC caliber program at Tulane. I also think he can kind of be picky. And it's not to say that Arkansas isn't a good job. It's just to say that I think for Jon Sumrall specifically, there's some jobs that are kind of more natural fits for him. He's from the state of Alabama. I don't think we're quite there yet with Hugh Freeze, but I think we're getting awfully close. I think a loss to Missouri this week, and all of a sudden it is DEFCON 5 at Auburn. By the way, a loss to Arkansas next week could be DEFCON 5 at Auburn. And I don't know, like let me even backtrack on Auburn. When we don't have to, this isn't an Auburn segment, but I don't know if you guys saw the quote from the Auburn AD, John Cohen, this week. It was kind of one of the wildest quotes I've ever seen on a coaching situation. They said, "Do you believe Hugh Freeze is on the hot seat?" And what he basically said was, listen, when I wake up every day and turn on my car, I don't expect there to be problems with the car. And I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but I don't expect there to be problems with the car. But sometimes there are. And when there are, you have to fix them as necessary. I think the insinuation is, right now, everything's fine, but I am willing to open up the possibility that I may have to be looking for a head coach here in the not too distant future. So Auburn, Jon Sumrall's from the state of Alabama. Obviously, he played at Kentucky. I see the Kentucky fans in the chat. They are ready for Jon Sumrall. Now, they got to figure out that Mark Stoops buyout situation, but that's one that I do think makes a little bit more sense for Sumrall. Played at Kentucky, coached at Kentucky, etc. And then Ole Miss, listen, Ole Miss is not going to open because Lane Kiffin gets fired. But what if Lane Kiffin takes the Florida job? Jon Sumrall also coached at Ole Miss, and there's ties there as well. I would assume he'd probably be the number 1 candidate there as well. So I just bring it up solely to say, when it comes to Arkansas, Sumrall's a great coach. I think there are more natural spots for him, assuming those jobs open up. And I would also say this with Sumrall. I know all these guys want to get out of the G5 because of the way things are set up with NIL and the portal. You can't retain your best players. But conversely, the reports are that he's one of the highest paid G5 head coaches, sitting at like $3.5 million a year, something crazy like that. It's a private school, so nobody actually knows. But I only bring it up because, to me, if you're not totally sure, if you're not all in on another move, you can wait another year. If Auburn doesn't open up this year, it might next year. What whatever. I don't know. I'm not going to start speculating on what jobs could open up in 2027 or, winter of 2026. But again, I understand why Jon Sumrall would be high on the list, but the alternative to that is I think there are more natural fits in the SEC if Arkansas is inclined. Really quickly, I do have to go ahead and talk about one more candidate at Arkansas. There's no real report that ties him, but he's got to be discussed. And this is, you talk about the candidates list that we had for Arkansas when the job first opened up. A guy that absolutely nobody could have foreseen becoming a hypothetical candidate for Arkansas. Again, make sure you're following our Torres on the Hogs page. Guy that nobody could have seen as a candidate. James Franklin. Like, what? Imagine me, like, Sam Pittman, the day he got fired, imagine me saying that within 3 weeks, James Franklin would be not only available as like a hypothetical, could you steal him away from Penn State, but he's fired and available to be a head coach. Producer Matt with the great graphic there. Let's talk about James Franklin, because I think James Franklin in the Arkansas community has become a divisive name. And you know where I stand on telling fans. I never tell fans how you should feel, what you should feel, why you should feel it. I know that he is divisive. I know that some fans don't love him. But I think the vast majority of fans do love him. I haven't had a chance to dive into it, but I saw my buddies, John Neighbors, Curtis Wilkerson, Andrew Ellis, Inside Arkansas, have put out a poll, and I think he's number 2 right now behind only Bobby Petrino. And I guess I do, to a degree, understand the idea of, listen, the only argument against James Franklin is the notion of like, listen, when you hire a head coach, you want to believe that that's a coach that can win you a national championship. And James Franklin maybe isn't that guy, maybe isn't great in big games. I also think if Arkansas can get him, I do think he's probably the best candidate available, right? Because listen, a couple things on James Franklin. One, for all of the can't beat Ohio State, can't beat Oregon, can't beat Michigan when they're really good, he does beat a lot of other teams. And I do think there is something to be said about, listen, and by the way, I know they lost to Northwestern. I know they lost to UCLA. But the counter to that is we have like a 15-year track record. James Franklin doesn't lose to bad teams. And so to me, with Arkansas, you're already in this spot where you're very competitive with all of these teams. People keep telling me, Arkansas is not a good job in this era. Well, you probably should have won at Ole Miss. Easily could have won at Tennessee. You're not that far away. And so to me, is James Franklin ever the guy that's going to get you over the hump and have a team on the field that's as good as the best Alabama or the best Georgia or the best Texas team ready to win a national championship? Realistically, probably not. I don't think any candidate is. But is he a candidate that has proven that he can win a lot of games at a high level? He has. That's something Alex Golish can't say, Jon Sumrall can't say, John Gruden can't say. You can go on and on down the list. The only guy that's proven that he can win at a high level in the SEC that's a realistic candidate is Bobby Petrino, and he's going to have a chance to prove himself going forward. But you look at James Franklin. He's proven he can do it at a high level, and he did it at Vandy. I was thinking about this. So it's not only the back-to-back 9-win seasons at Vandy. It's what happened before and what happened after he left. First of all, back-to-back 9-win seasons at Vandy in year 2 and year 3 in the pre-transfer portal era. Okay, it's not like it's 2025 and he flipped the entire roster and ran off 70 guys when he got there. He took over the worst program in the SEC, one of the worst programs in college football, and by year 2 had 9 wins. Year 3 backed it up. It wasn't a fluke. Like, it'd be one thing if it was in the NIL portal era, and that's no disrespect to Clark Lee or anybody who's doing it in a tough spot, but it's just different. And then 2, it'd be another thing if like he did it in year 6 and something fluky happened. No, he did it at Vandy in year 2 and year 3. So he's proven he can win at a high level. And the other thing I'm going to say about James Franklin, and I think this is important, we've learned a little bit more about that buyout from Penn State this week. And I'm not a contract lawyer. I don't have all the details, but my understanding of that buyout is pretty straightforward, is that he actively has to pursue other job opportunities, and the job, whatever they pay him, the rest is offset by Penn State, right? So let's take Arkansas out of it. Let's say he decides for a year, I just want to go into the media. and he goes to ESPN or Fox and they pay him $1 million a year. Well, Penn State still owes him $7 million or whatever. But the $1 million that he would be owed is offset. So in other words, whatever his new employer is paying him, Penn State isn't on the books for that. And so I bring it up because if he does take another job, and this is important, and Matt, this is where you can clip off the 2-minute segment, is if he does take another job and you can get him at some portion, some relative discount, that all of a sudden is money that you're not spending on a coach that you can spend on staff and heck, maybe NIL. And to me, that's really important for one simple reason. It is because your AD, Hunter Yurachek, is complaining that you cannot compete in the NIL era and that you're not built and you're not ready and you're not there and wait till rev share and this and that. Well, if all of a sudden you could get an $8 or $10 million head coach for $4 million and you got his last place paying half of his salary, that's $4 million that can go to some pretty good players. And so to me, I think it's a no-brainer that you should pursue him. Now, does he want to coach right away? Does he want to come to the SEC right away? And maybe somebody else makes more sense. Maybe Jon Sumrall, we get to the end of the year, and Jon Sumrall really wants to be in the SEC, and Kentucky doesn't open, Auburn doesn't open, whatever. Maybe, I don't know, maybe Bobby Petrino goes, whatever, they have what, 6 games left? Maybe he goes 5-1, and it's a no-brainer. You keep Bobby Petrino. But assuming none of that stuff happens, I don't know. I think you do a lot worse than James Franklin, in my opinion. And I think outside of just the win-loss record, the way the contract is set up where you can push all that money towards NIL, it's like, golly, gee whiz. I don't know. That sounds like a pretty good deal to me. I'll take that, I'll take that $4 million and spend, $800,000 on an offensive tackle, and the other thing, lastly, on Franklin, I'm thinking as well, is there is to me, and it's not a perfect apples to apples, but there is to me almost a parallel with Arkansas basketball to James Franklin and Arkansas football. What I mean by that is this. What Eric Musselman did was incredible. Took over a program with no blood, no juice, 3 Sweet 16s, 2 Elite 8s. And I've often said that if it's not for Eric Musselman, John Calipari is probably not interested in the Arkansas job. But they had made deep tournament runs. They proved they can recruit elite players. And Eric Musselman deserves a lot of credit for that. And I do wonder, Pittman didn't have that high level of success, but Pittman took over a dead program, the worst program in college football, and he proved you can put together a competitive roster together. You can put together a good staff together with Bobby Petrino. Could James Franklin be the guy to take it to another level? Obviously, we have to see if John Calipari takes it to another level, but I know Arkansas fans are feeling good about that. And then the question becomes, can James Franklin take it to another level as well?